Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Great to have you with us on the program today. A reminder, follow us on Facebook and like us on Facebook. Facebook.com/This Week in America. Facebook.com/This Week in America. Our guest on the program is Victor Sutch. He's retired and living in Kansas City. He spent several years in the United States Air Force, flying a number of years, then a 12-year stint as a professor at the Air Force Academy. From that assignment, he spent another 12 years as Associate Professor of History at Wright State University. At 92, he still writes every day, and we're talking in the program today about his most recent book, William Marion Branham, God's 20th Century Prophet. Victor, welcome to This Week in America. Great to have you with us on the program.
Well, thank you. That's by the way, that's 93 in 2 days.
Oh, well, happy birthday, 48 hours early. Happy birthday.
All right, thank you.
And you're still at it working, and I love the new book, William Marion Branham, God's 20th Century Prophet. And let's talk about the format that you chose for the book, because basically you used the Bible as an example, didn't you, in setting this book up?
Yes, I did. I had a reason for doing that. I took the pattern off of the New Testament about Jesus because a lot of the things that Jesus did and the way that God helped him to do them was repeated in Brother Branham's life. And I thought that the Christian world needs to know about that. They should be reading it. Most of them don't know anything about it. But some very, very amazing spiritual things happened in that life that the world needs to know. And I tried to lay that out there in that book. And I thought the pattern of the Bible was good. In a sense, this is an adjunct to the Bible. That's the way I look at it. The supernatural is appearing again in the 20th century like he appeared in the first century. And they're doing some of the things in the 20th century that he did in the first century. Well, that's it took me a while to get to that place before I could see that and believe it. But I'm there now, and I have been for quite some time.
As you're describing his events, you make clear that this really is accurate. This is exactly what happened. You're not enhancing it. You're not magnifying it for the purpose of writing a book. These are actual events, and you had to go through painstaking research in laying this all out, didn't you?
Yes, quite a little bit. I'm a historian, and I have published some history, and so this is historical work. There's no imagination. There's no fiction in this. It is what happened in the 20th century, mostly between 1946 and 1965, when Brother Branham died. But it's, these things happened. I didn't make any of that up. I didn't enlarge on it. I didn't change anything. I said it pretty much as it's there.
What's interesting is you look into his life and you feel, boy, there's really something special here. How did it go from that feeling to, I really need to go back, chronicle all of this, and put it into a book to spread the word and let other people know? Talk a little bit about that process.
Well, I've been a Christian most of my life, and I was first saved when I was 15 years old in a Nazarene church years ago. But in 1984, I ran across some people who kept talking about the prophet, and I said, well, who do you mean? Do you mean Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel? Who are you talking about? No, they said, we're talking about Brother Branham. Well, I'd never known anything about Brother Branham. And so I went to some of their services and listened to them, and they pointed me to some books. I read everything that's ever been written about Brother Branham. There's quite a little bit that has been. And it took me about 2 years to realize that this was real. This happened. That it was God, the supernatural, making himself felt again in our time. And that's so important that finally it got to me, and I said, people need to know about this. I may never be able to get people to read it, but I'm going to write it. And that's why I picked it up and started doing it. It took me 6 or 8 months to write that book, though.
Victor Sutch is our guest on This Week in America. The book is William Marion Branham, God's 20th Century Prophet. The book is available at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, the publisher InkWaterPress.com, and of course, we'll have a link on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Let's go back and talk about the very beginning. I'm talking about the log cabin back in Kentucky in 1909 when William is born, and literally from the time he was born, they knew there was something special. Talk about the light over the crib.
Well, Jesus' birth was a very special event. We celebrate it every Christmas, and we all know that that's a very, very special event there that happened in the history of the church. This happened also. It's a very special event. And I had to parallel it and to get that done that way. But his parents were only nominal Catholics. They never went to church. He'd never been to church himself when he was 20 or 21 years old. And so when he was born, this very strange thing happened. He was put into a homemade baby bed there for him, and a crib. And while they were there were 2 or 3 or 4 people in there that had been in there for the birth and to help. And this light came in the window and sat over the crib for just a little while, and then it went out the window and disappeared. And of course, the people there were amazed. Here's the first sign of something being very special about this child. And I'm sure they wondered, what is so special about this child that could have happened? But it happened just like that.
And this was not a special family. This was a very poor family. And at age 3, he had his first prophecy. Talk about that, because he was basically telling the family, this is where we're going to end up living soon. And it actually was right on the money.
Yes, it was. Well, being the gifts and the gifts that are given are given. You can't. In other words, if you look at the whole Bible, you can't make yourself a good person and pray and do all those things and make yourself into a prophet. Prophets are born. The Scripture says that. The prophets are born. They're not made by anybody. And he was born a prophet, and he had gifts. And that first gift, the first prophecy he made was that his parents, they were in Kentucky there, and down about 75 miles into Kentucky from Indiana. And he prophesied as a little boy that they would live somewhere close to, I can't think of the Indiana name, and I should remember that, of course, very close to Jeffersonville, but to another town. And, of course, his mother probably just brushed that off. That's what any mother would do.
Yes.
But within a matter of a short time, his father was a heavy drinker, and he was a very athletic kind of man, and he got into a fight in a bar and it turned into a brawl, and they had knives, and he knifed his opponents. It looked like he was going to die. He didn't die, but he was very in the hospital for quite a long time, and the sheriff of the county was after him. He found that out. He came home, packed his bags, and went across the Ohio River into Indiana. Went all the way about 100 miles away. And when he settled within a few miles of the city that he had forecast that that his son had forecast they would live there. When the family finally came there and joined him, they moved to Jeffersonville, Indiana, and that's very close to the place he had prophesied. It happened just exactly as he said it would.
The book is William Marion Branham, God's 20th Century Prophet. Victor Sutch is our guest on the program today. The book is available, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. Also available from the publisher, InkWaterPress.com, and link onto our website and get more information. Let's talk about some of those early years, and then we'll talk about when things really started to happen where he influenced literally hundreds of thousands of people. 9 years old, his dad's a bootlegger. You talk about a couple of experiences he had that really molded him, changed his life at that point. One is he's sitting under a poplar tree. Talk about that experience.
Yes, he was carrying water there for his mother from the pump, which is a block or so away, to the house. And he sat under a poplar tree for a little while to rest, and he heard a sound like a whirlwind going through the upper branches of that tree, and it was going whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. He could hear it, and suddenly a voice came out of there and said to him, "Don't you ever debase your body in any way. No smoking, no drinking, no abusing it in any fashion, because there's going to be work for you to do when you get older." Well, it frightened him to death, as you can be sure it would.
Yes.
He ran in and threw himself at his mother and said, that tree, it spoke to me. It spoke to me. Well, his mother thought he was having some kind of a fit and called the doctor, and the doctor said, well, put him to bed. He's not hurting in any way. Maybe he'll be all right after a bit. So she did. Well, that was the beginning of that voice that he's going to hear throughout his life. And after a while, he will see the person who was speaking those things in that voice. He came to know that voice very well.
Well, it's interesting because you talk about he's like 20 years old. He goes to Arizona. During that period, his brother died. He saw his parents cry for the first time he'd ever seen them cry.
That's right.
He decided, I really need to get closer to God, but he wasn't a godly person at that point, and he wasn't quite sure how to do that. And he started reading the Bible.
Well, he did that. He did that, of course, at first. He was, he was a man. He was a one third Indian or 1/4, and he liked the outdoors, and so he felt, well, the God's in the outdoors. He's in nature. Maybe I can find him there, because he wasn't having any success finding him anywhere else. And so he wrote messages and tacked them onto tree limbs as he went, hoping that maybe God would see them. Well, that didn't do any good for him, but he was praying in a shed out behind his parents' home, filled with trash and tools and things. And he prayed and prayed, and I got nowhere for a while. Then he prayed for some more, and suddenly a light appeared in that building. And then it went out and disappeared. And he said at that point, Lord, if that's you, if that light is you, please come back, show me yourself again. And the light came on again, and there he was. God was responding to him, and it was quite a powerful experience, as you can imagine it would be. He had never had anything like that before, and he ran down a railroad track and felt like a ton had been lifted off his shoulders. He leaped 10 feet into the air. I've had a little of that experience myself at certain times in my life, and I know what that is.
Well, he was ordained in 1932. In 1933, you talk about the spring of that year, he sets up a tent. He's got revivals. He's baptizing people. Yeah. And this light comes again. Talk about the experience there. They're in the water. He's baptizing. I think he's up to 17 that he's baptized. And again, there's this sign, this light in the air. In fact, it was seen by so many and such a dramatic sign that actually made the local newspaper.
Yes, it did. And AP picked it up and sort of put it out through the country also. But, yes, he had 200 converts who hadn't been baptized. He was baptizing them in the Ohio River. And on the 17th person he baptized, when that person came up out of the water, a light appeared above him, an amber light. And it came down and made some noise, and it seemed to be sweeping the waters around him. And then a voice came on and said, as John the Baptist foreran the coming of Christ, so your ministry will forerun his second coming. And then the light disappeared, and of course, the people on the bank, there were about 4,000 people there. They were screaming, and some of them fainted, some of them ran away, no one knew what to do. But finally the light disappeared, and he went on and baptized all 200 of them. when he came out of the water, they said, what was that, Brother Branham? What was that anyway? What's happening here? He said, I don't know. I know what the words were that were said, but I don't know what that means just yet. I'm sorry, I can't tell you. So it was quite a powerful thing that really manifested itself there for the first time in really, really spiritual, powerful ways.
So many examples like this in the book. William Marion Branham, God's 20th Century Prophet, the author and our guest on the program, Victor Sutch. Book available at Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, the publisher, InkWriterPress.com. In the book, you talk about hundreds of healings, dozens of miracles, all well documented, and we'll talk in a second about the number of followers, but again, numbering well into the hundreds of thousands, if not more. But he always rejected the idea when somebody would call him a divine healer. He rejected that, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He never would accept the fact that he was a divine healer. He preached divine healing, but he said, if I preach divine salvation, that doesn't make me a savior any more than preaching divine healing would make me a healer. But in his ministry, he had these great services that were just packed out every time he put up a tent or was in an arena or was anywhere else. The people just flocked in by the thousands. And as always those places were packed full when people began to realize that miracles were happening in those services. And it was quite a wonderful thing. He had people calling him to come and preach in their services from all over the country. Hundreds of invitations came to him every day, because that had never happened. No one had ever seen that happen before, but it started in 1946 in St. Louis, where they started in a tent. They ended up in a 5,000-seat auditorium. And then later they had a 19,000-seat auditorium. All of them were packed out. That was his first beginning of his first worldwide ministry that began there. And for the next 19 years, then those things happened everywhere he went. Now, he was the author of the Healing and Charismatic Revival. That's the last revival this country has had. He said it would be the last revival. We've had people, of course, saved and things like that have happened, but it was the last revival. It began in 1946 in St. Louis, and it ran on for the next 15 years or so. Wherever he went, worldwide. He went to Europe. He was in Finland and Sweden, Germany. He was in South Africa. He was in India. Wherever he went, the same kind of response was there. The building was always filled. The people were always at the door wanting to get in. It was the fire marshal who had to decide who came in and who could not come in. I have some more to say about that, but let me stop there. I probably said plenty. Go ahead.
No, I tell you, it's a fascinating story. William Marion Branham, God's 20th Century Prophet. Victor Sutch, our guest on the program tonight. Amazon.com, of course, is where you'll find the book. BarnesandNoble.com from the publisher as well. A few minutes left in the program, and I keep talking about how many followers. And you talk in the book, in 1956, he had about 500,000, and he had been preaching, as you said, 10 years up to that point. And you figure conservatively, like about 1 million people that came to the Lord through him?
Today there are 4 or 5 million people around the world who follow Brother Branham.
Wow.
His sermons are produced in 57 languages and are sent all over the world in these great shipping containers. And it's spreading rather rapidly right now, around, more so than in the United States and Canada, where it really all started. It's spreading worldwide. And doing really well there. I don't, there's no denomination there. There is no organization there. There is a publishing house that his children run. His son is the manager of that at Jeffersonville. The Voice of God recordings, they call that. But he's had, and now it's, I think, 57 languages that he's translated all of those sermons into and sent them abroad, and they go pretty well free around the world. So it's making quite a splash, although, again, no one knows much about that, or no one hears much about it anyway.
Well, you talk about what influence he had and continues to have, and obviously his word is still out there as vibrant and vital as it was when he was alive and actually preaching it. Again, a couple minutes left in the program. When somebody learns about Brother Branham, what is the message they'll take away? What message did you take away from his life?
Well, the thing that I see, and I'm trying to say, why a prophet? You know, we've had 2,000 years of the Christian church, but no prophet. We had prophets with, Jesus was a prophet of prophets. There's Paul and Peter and the apostles. They all had prophetic powers, but there's no prophet since then. We've had great leaders. We've had Luther and Calvin and Knox and John Smith and a lot of people, and John Wesley, but we've had no real prophets. We've had great preachers and great leaders, but no prophets. Here's the first one in 2,000 years. That's what makes this book so important.
Well, the book it's a fascinating read. It tells the whole story there, and his life wasn't. He was a sinner at an early age. He had turbulence in his marriage and lost a wife and a daughter. That's all accounted in the book. The book is William Marion Branham, God's 20th Century Prophet. Victor Sutch is our guest on the program. The book is available at Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, InkWriterPress.com, and, of course, all that information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Victor, it's an excellent book. You're touching a lot of people with a very important message. Thank you so much for sharing it with us on the program.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It needs to have some publicity, and I don't know how exactly to get it. Somebody with some power in the publishing world needs to get a hold of it and realize what it is, but nobody has done that yet.
Well, we'll try to do our small part here and get the word out to everyone. And once again, the title, William Marion Branham, God's 20th Century Prophet. You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network.